Welcome to this edition of Valley Newsline. Hello, I'm your host, Ron Whitlock. It is an often forgotten reality that the state of Texas is not run by its representatives and state senators, but in fact, it is run by members of state boards, commissions, and councils. You, if you're a resident of the Lone Star State, could serve as a member of a state board, commission, or council. All you have to do is apply to the Texas governor, Governor Rick Perry, for service on a state board, commission, or council that is of interest to you. You don't believe me? Well, here's Texas Senator Eddie Lucio.
Texas is run by boards and commissions, not by the legislature. Texas is run by boards and commission members appointed by the governor, confirmed by the Senate, and on a daily basis, they decide the future of this area of the state.
Later on in the program, we'll tell you how to become a gubernatorial appointee and serve yourself on a state board, commission, or council. But first, Valley Newsline is very proud to bring you the first interview with the new chairman of the TCEQ, Buddy Garcia of Brownsville. First of all, about the TCEQ, it's called the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. It has approximately 3,000 employees, 16 regional offices, a $480 million operating budget, of which 85% comes from those who it regulates and program fees. Now, Buddy Garcia of Brownsville, the new chairman of the TCEQ. Chronological order, Senator Lucio, then you went to work immediately for Lieutenant Governor Perry, okay, then Governor Perry, and then Assistant Secretary of State, Border Affairs is a primarily responsibility, correct?
Assistant Secretary of State and Border Commerce Coordinator, another title I held there as well.
Okay. And then Commissioner of the TCEQ. How many employees, how big a budget? That's where everybody looks to see how big an entity that you're.
Well, almost 3,000 employees. I don't know what the budget is exactly, but we are the second largest environmental regulatory agency in the world, next to the EPA.
Wow. And exactly what does it do for the benefit of the people of Texas?
Well, the TCEQ balances not only do we give out permits for businesses, just about any permit that comes into Texas, any business that comes into Texas requires a permit, whether it be air permit, water permit, landfills, but we try to balance not only the economic development, but to limit and if you will, the negative impacts that any businesses will have on the environment. Try to enforce, especially when violations occur to those permits. And we are a partner of EPA at the state level, but we have pretty much the same, minimize the negative impacts on the environment if at all possible.
Would you say one of the primary, or is it the primary responsibility to assure the people of Texas that the water they're drinking out of their tap is safe, sanitary, and good for them?
I would say that is a very direct obligation of this agency.
Is it number one?
Among many. That's, our mission statement has a number of things, but enforcing the law. So that would be the state water laws, state water, as well as the Federal Clean Water Drinking Act. So. And same applies to air. It is our job to enforce the law and use common sense and good science and kind of a triangulation of sorts of what I use to try to, in my quasi-judicial role, do my job. I try to think of the variety of things that we need to do.
Your term will go through 2011, so you'll outlive, so to speak, service to the state of Texas, your governor who appointed you to this position. So he does not. Oh,
unless he chooses to run again.
Unless he chooses to run again.
But yeah, that's in theory I'll be here, and my ambition is to be here to 2011 through my term.
Well, walking through the halls of St. Joseph in Brownsville, going through high school, you ever dream or think you'd be in this position today?
Not when I was at St. Joe. I do. Even back then, had a love of government, though, and I had ambition to
from the service,
be in public
service angle.
I always wanted to be in public service at some capacity, and I never really thought about Washington. and the benefits of working for the state. Even at that young age, I thought, well, wouldn't it be neat to be able to live in Austin, Texas? Of course, at the time, I didn't really anticipate, nor did I, when I started working for Senator Lucio, ever envision such a long career in state government.
In a Cliff Note sort of way, what would you tell viewers to this station? Why should they get involved in public service? What's it all about?
Well, I think it's more than an obligation. I think people need to look at state government and involvement in public service, if not charitable organizations, as a very necessary part of being an American. At some point in your life, you're going to be affected by government. The legislature sets your taxes. The various agencies at the state, federal, or local level, as difficult as it is for some people to want to get involved in, as cynical as people are of government, we all have a role to play.
If you don't do it, somebody else is going to.
That's right. And
they may not be as competent or as concerned as you are.
And for the most part, I agree with that completely, as well as the fact that you want people, I think, from all walks of life. Otherwise, you're limited to a certain amount of people who may be interested in government because of maybe their background or their exposure, their proximity to the Capitol. But it's a very big state, 23 million Texans, and it's every one of us from around the state, especially the Rio Grande Valley, have a voice, and we should be a part of it.
What issues for the border and the Rio Grande River in particular do you see that you might be able to bring to bear more effectively?
Well, as you're aware of, the ongoing water treaty, the 1944 water treaty with Mexico, although the state doesn't have a place at the table between the two federal governments. As you know, it's not only an ongoing issue, every 5 years cycle, but the enormous amount of people along both sides of the border, the population is going to continue to explode, and water, quite frankly, is going to continue to be a problem in the future, whether it be drought or floods. How do we maintain a balance? And those are the issues at the forefront for me that not only are part of my background, but things that I feel very comfortable suggesting we're going to move forward in a positive manner. But not only that, there are issues along the border that get a lot of focus that I think are obviously in the press all the time, and notwithstanding any of those issues, legal trade, how do we deal with some of the environmental problems on both sides, tire accumulation, water quality issues, water and wastewater in particular, how we can work on both sides, which we are doing, trying to figure out ways that we can work as a team, and not in a condescending fashion, but in a way that we share technologies, that share ideas, ultra-low sulfur fuel initiatives that Pemex has been willing to consider, because Texas approaches things in a more of a neighborly fashion. I intend to expand on some of those ideas and make that a top priority. I've been blessed to have Governor Perry's willingness to support some of the initiatives that I come up with, and now being here, those are some of the areas I'd like to focus on.
I was taken with your picture in your hallway, good enough to drink early irrigation system, showing two people from probably the 20s or 30s, my guess, drinking irrigation water and being happy that it's good enough to drink. On that basis, the Rio Grande is obviously the #1 irrigation source for all agriculture in the valley. It's the water source of almost every community in the Rio Grande Valley. Yet that river is unsecure because the other side is Mexico, and that could be obviously tampered with from a terrorist group or some other manner of means that we have no control over. The federal government has determined that there needs to be water sampling technology to alert us quickly if we are attacked in a terrorist manner or any other manner of means, and the federal government has put a $40 million number on the table for pilot programs for water sentinel kinds of technology. McAllen and Brownsville both have sent in applications for some of those federal funds for water sampling technology. Would you be in support of McAllen and Brownsville's application to this federal EPA fund, Homeland Security and EPA, working in tandem for security and environmental quality? I
would not only be in support of that, and I'm supporting ideas of new water sources as well, desalination program that I would love to continue to build on.
Why would improved technology in this area be so important that the federal government would put $40 million into pilot programs?
Well, obviously they see the writing on the wall that limited water sources where there's a lot of people are probably in very real need of protection, if not expansion, and having more water sources than we currently have, so we aren't so dependent on only one source.
I think they're seeing a probe in the Rio Grande, maybe at Angel Lewis Dam, some of the locations, so if something bad is put in the water upriver, below Falcon, for instance, it's coming to the valley, if that sampling device would certainly alert all of those municipalities. The city of Brownsville says we need to tap into McAllen because McAllen will tell Brownsville, hey, the bad stuff's coming. That's right. So give us a piece of technology if you can develop it, and we feel much more secure about it. That's the general idea.
And quite honestly, I think it's a shame we have to consider these things, but water supplies, and if bad people want to do things, there's all sorts of ways that people can notwithstanding the Rio Grande, but any water supply. It just seems like we have a number of vulnerabilities. I think it deserves focus and studying. As a result of this last session, there's a new Border Security Council, which I will be serving as a member, that I was appointed by the governor recently to serve on.
Homeland Security?
It's a Border Security Council, which among other things will look at Homeland Security and how that money is spent, and so I'm sure that some of these ideas would fall into that realm, and I'd be more than happy to study it further and make appropriate recommendations where necessary.
Air quality and air safety, big factor, because obviously coming from the valley, you realize 95% of the time the air is coming off of the country of Mexico, a foreign country, predominant prevailing wind in your hometown in Brownsville, out in the southeast at 15 miles an hour. Well, if somebody were to drop a dirty bomb in Matamoros, it'll be over St. Joe in a matter of minutes.
You said that better than I could. You're right, southeast prevailing wind. I can't think of a day I've ever been there where it's not blowing out of there, exactly, that direction. So
on the same basis, water's insecure, the air definitely insecure. What would your agency, or could it do in helping Homeland Security better prepare for that eventuality?
Well, you bring up some areas that again I think involve our neighbors in Mexico, and not in a condescending fashion, but in a willing, neighborly fashion. Develop ideas with them as technology is developed, as we develop ideas about coordinating our interest in not only air quality but wastewater, how to balance the need for economic development and legitimate trade.
Reynosa and Matamoros now putting today effluent, direct raw effluent, into the Rio Grande as we speak.
And quite frankly, we have to reverse that. We have to figure out a way, and my experience has been when you roll up your sleeves and suggest to our neighbors, how can we do this together, we have a very receptive audience. So it's a combination of things that we need to do, not only here in Texas with some of the growing metropolitan areas that are having issues with their air quality. It also involves cars, and quite a bit of the NOx and CO2 and things that go into the air that come out of cars. And I mentioned earlier these ultra-low sulfur fuel initiatives, things that we can try to get our Mexican neighbors to realize, hey, in these concentrated areas where so many cars are on the road and idling trucks at bridges and things, can we work on ways to expedite trade in a quicker fashion, but maybe share some of these ideas about cleaning up the air. I think that for the most part, not only from the Fox administration, but now the Calderon administration, and so many of these issues that are handled at the federal level that are handled at the state level in the United States, that we have wonderful opportunities to expand on. It's a matter of effort and who's going to put the effort in, and I'd like to be a part of that. It just makes sense.
Looking at water safety, the city of Corpus Christi, within a few days of this interview, were placed in a must-boil situation. All the citizens of that community had to boil water if they were going to consume it. All the restaurants were shut down for at least one evening. That's almost third world countries situations where you've got an entire community's water supply being declared by TCEQ is undrinkable. You concerned about what happened in Corpus Christi, and what are you going to be doing in helping them to try and rectify any future occurrence?
Well, I believe very strongly that the mechanisms are in place to catch that sort of thing, and our agency would, in a situation like that, notify the local authorities when necessary to put a boil ban in place.
Does that happen very often?
Well, it happens as often as something that occurs, and it could be, yes, I would say that the enforcement orders occur every other week when I go to agenda at various levels, maybe not to that scale.
Have you ever had a city that size go to a must-boil situation?
Yes. I mean, we have enforcement orders of a variety of magnitude, even involving the Valley and others that may not be widely reported because it becomes a small thing, as well as situations that aren't illegal, right, that you may hear about and you find out, well, that doesn't warrant that. But any of those issues, as they go through the framework, the bureaucratic framework, are addressed appropriately, and there's ways of addressing those through enforcement orders, and then whether it be fines or cleanup. But at the very least, it is our obligation, duty, and emphasis to protect the public, put that information out in a timely manner, make sure that no one is getting sick from that, and then once it's cleaned up and remedied, then revisit those types of situations, whether it be through enforcement order or others. Very big priority, but necessary, and especially in a time where they were inundated with some 19 inches of rain, and I'm sure parts of Nueces County and that surrounding counties are still underwater. We're in hurricane season. If another major storm approaches, we need to be prepared for just any scenario and proactively address that.
Mayor Corpus Christi told me they were not sure at this moment whether the problem occurred from the water through the Nueces River, because their primary water source is Lake Corpus Christi coming down the Nueces, followed by other things which may have occurred within the system itself. He's heading up an investigatory team, part of the city. Now the city water manager, the supervisor, has resigned effective immediately. And when this all came to a head, many citizens are calling for the resignation of the city manager. So heads are beginning to roll already in the city of Corpus Christi. What is your department going to be doing to assist Corpus Christi in determining where the problem occurred?
Well, we notified them appropriately to put into place some kind of a boil order, I believe, and any enforcement order, which will be what occurs next, is something that I'm precluded by law from discussing until it's in front of me, because I have to look at the parameters of just the facts of the case.
So they are, at this moment, TCEQ is looking at, will there be fines, will there be sanctions?
That's my understanding, yes.
Right.
But I can attest, I was down in the Valley over the 4th of July, week of the 4th of July, and I was driving back, I think it was approximately July 11th or so, and as you approach that Labani Park point there, where on I-37, the water was up to the bottom of I-37, and that whole park was covered where the Nueces is. So I can attest that they truly were under a rather odd for July rain event, and then given the hurricane season, as I mentioned, there's no reason to believe in delta areas like that water's going to drain or go anywhere right away, so you bring into a very good point of the large nature, complex nature of how water systems work, but the need nonetheless is that the water be safe. And that's not an option, and so that's what we do. We have to protect the citizens of Texas.
There is one water district in the Valley that's wanting to try and acquire some of this technology to sample water at the intake point, meaning at their pump at the Rio Grande, so they can assure their farmers that if they do have lettuce, if they do have spinach, they will not have a meltdown such as occurred in California when we had E. coli contamination of that food source, which spread across the entire United States. Also, I don't know about you, but I grew up drinking water out of an irrigation district. I didn't have on my farm where I grew up, we didn't have potable water. It had gone through a process. We drank it directly out of the Rio Grande from a pump, just like they're talking about. So there are many, as you know, in the Valley who do the same. They drink their water directly out of a canal.
Just so you'll know, I grew up drinking water mostly out of a hose, it seemed like, public municipal water that started in the Rio Grande. But But you raised some not only good points about the cleanliness of it, but things that I'd like to also convey to folks that are so important about conservation, things you can do at home on your own. And actually on Earth Day this past, my 5-year-old son suggested that, well, what are we doing? So we developed and put together a rainwater collection barrel at our house. And since it rained so well this summer, it filled up a couple of times over, and we use that and to water the plants when we can. And ideas like that are probably very popular and common in Mexico. You can't find a house that doesn't have a rainwater barrel on top because of the scarcity of water. Things that we probably could all learn from going back in time. Maybe it was an irrigation ditch or what have you, but things that some of the folks that in my grandfather's era probably did on a regular basis. You know, windmills, and they pulled up the water out of the ground and used it for everything, and conservation is always a good idea. Some of those ideas tie into what you're saying. Back to your point, I'd be happy to learn anything I can.
Chairman Garcia,
thank you.
3,000 employees under you that will look up to your leadership and guidance. Good luck in your tenure until 2011 here at the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. And thank you for appearing on Valley News Live.
Well, thank you, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.
During a 4-year term, a Texas governor on average makes approximately 3,000 appointments. If you are to apply and then are selected by the governor and his appointments office to serve on a Texas board, commission, or council, those councils carry out the laws and direct the policies of state governmental agencies. Also, you can serve on a task force that advises the governor or executive agencies on specific issues and policies. Or state elected and judicial offices may be where you would apply and be appointed to when vacancies occur by resignation or the death of an office holder. To apply to the governor of Texas, go to the Texas governor's website, then click on Appointments Office for an application. Remember, good government begins with good people offering themselves up for public service. Till next time here on Valley Newsline, adios.